Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth. Hello and welcome back to the Family Beacon podcast. My name is Grace Evans. I'm here with Moses Brattrud. I just wanted to quickly give a plug for our social media before we jump into our episode today. You can follow us at MN Family Council on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram to get daily, weekly updates on everything we're up to. Definitely go ahead and follow us on all of those platforms. Also follow us on YouTube, again, at MN Family Council, to make sure you're up to date on all of the things we're posting on all our platforms, especially our Instagram. We're very active on there. Anyways, without further ado, though, let's jump in. Let me give you a rundown of everything we will be discussing on today's podcast. First, Moses and I will give you a brief legislative update on especially the recent abortion bill, the health omnibus abortion bill, or the health omnibus bill that includes abortion provisions, I should say, to be really technical there. We'll give you an update on that. We want to also share with you a recent poll from NPR that shows that Americans want restrictions on abortion. So in other words, most Americans actually support life, which is what we've been saying for years and years.
For everybody in the back.
Most Americans support life.
There it is.
We've been saying it for years, and here we go. Here's more polling to prove us right. We will also discuss a recent article that came out that basically called Minnesota a left-wing experiment, which is the facts. I mean, it feels like we're kind of lab rats here in Minnesota and we don't know what's coming next. It's like, what next policy is going to happen?
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys as the audience have telegraphed this yet, but Grace and I don't like that.
No.
That feeling of being lab rats. So we'll talk about that a little bit more.
We'll talk about that. We'll break that down for you guys. And then we will also discuss a recent controversy with Children's Minnesota, which is, you know, one of our children's hospitals here in Minnesota, the most common one, and how they're affirming gender care, so-called gender care, I should say. So we'll talk about that, some controversy surrounding that. We might get to a fourth or a fifth story. If we do, it'll be about something pretty exciting that's happening in Florida that we want to alert you to. But without further ado, let's jump in because we do have a good amount of things to cover today. So Moses, let's talk about the legislative update. Let's talk about this health omnibus bill that has those abortion provisions. So it's already been heard in the conference committee. Is that correct? Has it moved forward at all?
So my understanding is that, there's the conference committee is 5 members from the Senate and 5 members from the House, and they meet together and they probably have coffee and snacks, I would imagine. It's closed door. I'm pretty sure of that. You can't just go in there and watch them do that unless there's a special invite. I'm not going to swear to that, but I think that's true. And so what they're doing is they're trying to hash out the differences between the version of the health omnibus bill passed by the Minnesota House and the version passed by the Minnesota Senate. So the bills need to be identical so that they can then pass again in both bodies and then go to the governor. That's how passing a bill works. So but the omnibus bills, hence the name, as we've discussed before, are very long. So there are potentially a lot of differences between the House and Senate versions. In this case, the House version contains all of these nasty abortion provisions that we've been talking about almost since day one. The HF91, SF70 provisions, repealing Infants Born Alive Protection Act, repealing women's right to know, killing the unborn, but also killing the Positive Alternatives program that gives people alternatives to abortion.
Another thing that this omnibus bill includes is it removes the state abortion data collection and reporting, which right now abortion facilities, Moses, are required to actually report if they're performing abortions and exactly how many they're performing. All of that information is supposed to be reported, which is why we can say, okay, we know how many abortions were performed in Minnesota this year. Right. And we can see if they're going up, if they're decreasing, if they're increasing, all of those things. And that's really important to us to know. How are we doing on the fight for life? Like, how many lives were saved this year? How many children were aborted this year? We need to know those things. Well, under this bill, if this was passed, this would not be the case. It would not be required. And of course, abortion facilities are not just out of the kindness of their heart going to decide to report this if it's not required. No. They're not going to do that because they want you to believe that they don't really perform abortions. That's what they want you to believe, even though that's where they make their most money. So of course, they do a lot of them. So that would be repealed. Additionally, It would expand taxpayer funding of abortion on demand here in our state, which has already been expanded, of course, under PRO Act. But I do want to note that this whole bill is not just a footnote to PRO Act. It's, which we've discussed before in the podcast, it is a massive expansion to abortion in Minnesota because it strikes down all of the things Moses mentioned, the two things I mentioned. It strikes down, it removes so many things. So the only remaining provisions and protections for women, the only remaining basically limits on abortion in Minnesota would be stripped away if this passed.
Right. And the positive alternatives thing is such a great example of something that everyone should, emphasis on should, agree is a good idea. Just we all know that there are alternatives to abortion, and women should be given access to those alternatives. And the state should encourage women to carry their children to term, connect them with maternity resources, connect them with adoption resources if necessary. The idea that the state should not be doing that is absurd. But we can't have the state doing that anymore because abortion is the best thing. It's literally the best thing that you can do. It's self-care, right? And so hence we get legislators, progressive legislators who want to cut positive alternatives.
Right.
So here's what you can do about this. We sent out an email the other day telling you to send a message to the 10 members of the conference committee, asking them, please remove these harmful abortion provisions from the final version of the health omnibus bill. And we're praying and we're hoping that legislators will listen to the voice of the people on that one. Hundreds and hundreds of people have already taken action and sent that message. So thank you so much if you've done that. If you would like to send that, if you don't get MFC's emails, and if you would like to still send that message, I'm wondering if that's been shared on our Instagram or social media.
That has not been shared, but it will be shared today.
Okay, yep. Awesome.
So by the time you see this, it will be on our social media.
Yeah, and it is one of the most important things we can do, right, is tell legislators so that they actually hear from real people, please do not make Minnesota an abortion mecca, as we've discussed before. So that segues really well into why it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Among many other reasons, it would be a bad idea even if everyone was in favor of it. But this idea that we've been hearing from Democrats, and I have a great quote on this. Actually, I'm going to share it right now.
Please do. Yes.
In Tim Walz, Governor Walz, in this other article, he said, "This isn't about jamming down Democratic priorities. These are proven things that improve people's lives."
Well, laugh. Proven things that kill innocent children and hurt women.
He said his party's policy goals, quote, are about not allowing our people to be demonized because of Republicans wanting to go to war on social issues. That whole dichotomy, what is he doing there? He's actually demonizing the people that are standing up for life. He's like, this is not about allowing people to be demonized. So what he's saying is that if you are a Minnesotan and you stand up for the sanctity of human life, that therefore you're demonizing the people that are fine with baby murder. That's what he's saying. He's saying, oh, you need to be loving, you need to be tolerant, you need to be accepting. And so in my mind, what this really plays into is the whole idea that abortion is just a matter of personal preference. Because if abortion were just a matter of personal preference, then yeah, it would be pretty rude for people to be out here on the streets being like, don't do this. But guess what? It's not a matter of personal preference. Right. A woman can go decide what kind of haircut she wants to get. She can decide what color she wants her nails to be painted. Within reason.
She can, Moses, here we have a legalist. No. Okay, you can decide what color you want your nails to be painted. You can decide where you want to live, who you want to marry. That's awesome. Those are all personal preferences. And so if someone was trying to say, oh, you can only paint your nails blue, you can't ever paint them pink, that, of course, would be a weird demonization of our personal preference. But we know that moral issues are not a matter of personal preference. There are some things that are just morally wrong. And so I have a really big problem with that statement, because in saying we don't want our people to be demonized, he's demonizing everyone that actually stands up for the preborn.
There it is. And Governor Walz, again, gaslighting the majority of Minnesotans who want restrictions on abortion, as this NPR poll makes clear. So again, this is a national poll, but Minnesota polling numbers show pretty much exactly the same thing. And that is 2 out of 3 Americans want abortion to be illegal completely or legal only in the case of rape, incest, or the life of the mother is at risk, or limited and banned after the first trimester. Now, that is a huge majority, 2 out of 3. Now, 75% of independent voters feel the same way. That's 3 out of 4 independent voters. And again, those are those swing voters who swing elections one way or the other, hence the name. So I find this poll interesting because there's some interesting numbers. I like the way the poll was done. It asks some questions that get down below the headlines. So one thing that I found interesting is how last year at this time, in May 2022, only 27% of Republicans supported a heartbeat abortion ban. And you know what? Like, we're happy to lead the charge on that. Like, it's okay to be ahead of popular opinion on banning the murder of children. Okay, it's fine. We don't care that not everyone is with us on that particular issue yet. However, we're moving in the right direction because now the polling numbers are saying that 40% of Republicans nationally are in favor of a heartbeat ban. And I really want to give credit to Governor Greg Abbott in Texas and other pro-life leaders.
Ron DeSantis,
although Florida's heartbeat bill was very recent. So I'm kind of thinking of those leaders who even last year and even before Dobbs passed heartbeat legislation that would then go into effect immediately.
So amazing. It gives me chills, like good chills thinking about it, of just these brave men and women who put their careers on the line to push this legislation. And just, I mean, I have a friend in, I think Louisiana is where she lives, and she works for a local pregnancy resource center and does communications and speaking events and things for them. And just how amazing it is that Louisiana completely protects human life now. Like, they had the legislation in place, and as soon as the Dobbs decision came, as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, boom, the pregnancy resource centers were so needed. The abortion facilities completely shut down. It was not legal for them. Like, that is just so amazing. That's the power of the pro-life movement. That is the power of 50 years of hard work, of being faithful. And just, it's encouraging to me, even though we live in such a different state, that, okay, if we really hustle and if we're faithful for the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years, however many years it takes, God really can do amazing things. All we can do is plant the seed and water, but God will give the growth. And so it gives me so much hope. And I'm just so grateful for those that came before us, Moses, because we're relatively new to this fight, but there are people that have been fighting this since before we were born.
Yes. That's such a good reminder. And, I just would ask people, do you want Minnesota to be a state that protects kids? Like, that's where it comes down to. We see states that do, like Louisiana, like Tennessee, like Texas, like Florida. And we see states that don't, like Illinois or Massachusetts or California. And which path will we choose? We're in the middle of the country and we are pulled in 2 different directions, and we need to pray that God will help us move the momentum in the other direction towards protecting life. One other number, Grace, that I wanted to highlight from this poll that is not quite as positive is whether people are asked which party they trust more on the abortion issue. And 41% of Americans trust Democrats more on the abortion issue. 25% trust Republicans more. So that's about a 16% difference. So why then would people trust Democrats on this issue? And I think there's probably a trust issue with the Republicans on a lot of social issues. Historically, women and swing voters, independents, have seen Republicans as being harsh or unfeeling, too willing to cut things like Social Security or welfare benefits. Just harsh, that they're supposed to be the party of big business, and Democrats are the party of big government. And sometimes those things are true and sometimes they're not. So people have this perception, and that perception might be that Republicans are going to move really fast to do X, Y, or Z. And so I just wonder what if I'm not a Republican. I'm not a registered Republican. I'm just giving advice, friendly advice, which would be, I think Republicans really do need to get the message right.
Absolutely.
And I think the message that, this is just me guessing, but I think what people want to hear is, we see that, 2/3 of the population wants abortion limits. So let's do that. But let's also talk about spending actual tax dollars to help women and those babies who will be born instead of aborted. We're going to need to spend money if we're going to make an investment in humanity, in bringing more children into the world. And some of those kids are going to be in low-income homes, in unstable family situations. That's the reality of the cause of life. We want to bring all those kids into the world because that's so much better. God is so much more glorified in that. And those kids have a chance to make their lives great when they instead of no chance at all. But we need to have that support network in place. And crisis pregnancy centers are a huge part of that. Local churches are a part of that.
Yes, churches.
But, just like with positive alternatives, the government has to actually be in favor of children being born. Like
Right.
It's crazy that we have to say that, but
children
that's
are
what
not
needs
burdens;
to happen.
they're blessings.
Yeah,
that's the facts.
Right, and we also need more of them as a country. Like our birth rate is cratering. I won't go on that. I won't go on that tangent.
The natalism tangent.
Yeah,
I do have a quick comment, just kind of off of your whole point about candidates and voting and why we need strong candidates. We've seen throughout the past few years, but especially the last election, how much our country and our state needs strong leaders. Now, what we don't want is squishy Republicans who are saying they're mostly pro-life or they're personally pro-life. That's not what our state needs. That's not what our country needs. Actually, we see candidates win when they are unabashedly, boldly, no exception, pro-life from womb to tomb. When we see them really stand up for the things that matter, when we see them stand against the mutilation of children, stand against the murder of children, stand up for the nuclear family, stand up for school choice, that's when we see them win. When we see them fail to compromise, it's when all of these different candidates that are like, they say they're Republican and they say they're pro-life, but then they're kind of squishy. That's when we lose. But when we get someone like Ron DeSantis, who's not perfect, but someone like Ron DeSantis or Greg Abbott, when we see people like that, they win because they don't compromise on these issues.
Absolutely.
And so Republicans / Christians / conservatives, a lot of us lay people that are obviously for all these biblical values, what we want to see is candidates that aren't going to compromise and be wishy-washy. And so that is my encouragement is we need to vote for only the people that are truly going to stand up for these values without like sitting back and saying, oh, well, we can compromise a little, like, mutilation is fine or, abortion's fine in the first trimester. No, guys. No. You're not going to win if you do that. And it's also not right. And God's not going to be happy with you when you get to heaven.
Yeah. We cannot compromise on the things that are most important, and protecting life is one of those things. I think that's a good segue into this NBC article, which I just find funny. And it's
so funny because it's by NBC.
Yeah, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, Grace, but okay. I did want to highlight a couple things. So I'll just read a quote. When Minnesota Democrats won back the majority in the state Senate last fall, they achieved a dream.
The dream,
yeah.
The dream, guys.
The only one they had, and that is true because
power and money and ways to make people's lives miserable and kill children and mutilate children.
Absolutely. A trifecta of control across the legislature and the governor's office. It's Minnesota that's attracting attention as a laboratory for how to effectively use that. Oh, great. So there's that laboratory where lab rats in the cage.
High five, Moses.
And we
thriving.
The thing about it is that we can't escape. We can go to another state, but that's not what we're going to do. We're going to take over the laboratory.
That's right.
So
it's like the Rats of Nim. Have you read that book?
I love that book.
Yes. Or the Rats of Nim, you guys know, the Rats of MFC or something.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so watch out, guys.
Yeah, watch out.
As a laboratory for how to effectively use that power to achieve progressive policy priorities. Nearly 4 months into the legislative session, Democrats in the state have already tackled protecting abortion rights. Notice this phraseology.
Protecting abortion rights.
Yeah.
Promoting the murder of children.
Right. Legalizing recreational marijuana and restricting gun access.
Taking away our rights.
I'm sorry, but I'm not actually aware of any meaningful gun control things that they've done. I don't think that I missed that. They may have advocated for it, but I don't think they've actually done it.
It says they've tackled protecting.
Okay,
so
there we go.
I think that
weasel words. And they have signaled their plans to take on issues like expanding paid family leave. See, that was on the floor a few days ago. So that they're actually doing. And providing legal refuge to trans youths.
Legal refuge to trans youths. That is such.
Remember, like,
sorry, you can rant. Go ahead.
No, like, guys, this is the kidnapping bill. Okay, we're not talking about what that means. Is kids from other states coming here to get something that their parents have said is not right for them, and it's not right for them because it's experimental and extremely harmful. And Minnesota wants to be a center for that, and just like the state has said, we want to be a center for abortion. One thing that we talked about how abortion rates have gone up in Minnesota since Dobbs. And I did see a number the other day that it was up 66%, which is insane. I need to confirm
Wait, that
that
abortion
number.
rates are up that much?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was.
Wait,
I need
in
to
Minnesota?
confirm. Yeah, in Minnesota.
Okay, I was going to say, because nationwide it's plummeting.
No, nationwide it's plummeting, but
Yeah.
people are coming from out of state to get abortions here, and so those numbers are going up here in Minnesota.
Sorry. They provide legal refuge to trans youths. Like, it's such euphemisms. I know you already said it, but it's just, this is called, actually what they're doing is they're providing it to be, they're making it possible. They're giving the government the power to kidnap children from their parents. And that's what they're doing. The euphemisms, it's like the whole the pro-life abortion debate. It's the same thing. Like, they call murder healthcare, and here they're calling mutilation and kidnapping healthcare.
Right.
Crazy. Anyways.
So I think the only thing that I thought was actually accurate about this article, I mean, some of the facts obviously are accurate. We are being experimented on, and
delightful.
And that is how they put it in the article. I'm not putting words in their mouth.
I think it's funny because they're acting like it's a good thing.
Right.
It's like
yeah, they have all these people like Senator Tina Smith and all these Democratic strategists saying how wonderful it is that Minnesota can be a beacon of light. And
beacon of death and mutilation.
Yeah, it's really bad. And then so the only really, I think, true and insightful thing is that when one party controls every branch of government, the article says they often go too far and voters punish them for it. That is true. We've seen that historically many times. And I think we can expect that to happen in Minnesota. We can certainly pray for it. And I also think that if we just tell people what the progressive majority has actually done, we're pretty much 85% of the way to getting them to a place where they consider voting for someone else, because we're, again, talking about things that people do not support. Taxpayer-funded elective abortion throughout 9 months of pregnancy. Find any poll. I challenge you. I dare you. Find any poll that shows the Minnesotans want that. You can't, because they don't. So we talk, this article is, a lot of it is about abortion and gender. Grace, you have been doing a little bit of a dive on Children's Minnesota, our state's premier children's research hospital, and they have come to the forefront of this issue. And
they really have.
I'm wondering why that is and what can we do about it? Yeah,
so they recently celebrated Governor Tim Walz signing the bills that we warned you about. We've warned you about them. So they signed this bill into law last week. This bill that makes Minnesota, quote, a safe haven for children seeking puberty blockers. So again, this is the kidnapping bill. And so in light of this, they basically, two kid experts is what they call them. So two of the doctors in the pediatric care organization were invited to witness the governor sign those bills into law. So let me just quickly refresh you on those bills. Again, one is the kidnapping bill, but then one is the bill that actually bans conversion therapy. And conversion therapy, again, is when someone, so a child in this case, wants to get help, mental help from a professional to help them not side with gender dysphoria. So they're uncomfortable.
We should clarify, I've talked to people who help kids in that situation. Nobody calls it conversion therapy. Nobody uses that word. That's not what it is. What it is compassionate, counseling. Voluntary counseling and care that really has, like all mental health counseling, it has the client's goals first and foremost. And so when young people are saying that they want to bring their sexual identity or their gender identity into accordance with their deeply held beliefs, their religious beliefs or whatever, then a counselor should be able to do that.
Right.
And that is what that bill, the so-called conversion therapy ban, makes illegal.
And it was interesting because on the floor, several Republicans actually pointed out that, quote, gender affirming care is actually a form of conversion therapy in and of itself. And so if we're banning conversion therapy, if we're banning counseling that detracts you from accepting that, then I guess what we should actually also be banning gender affirming care.
And the really big difference there, Grace, is how what so-called gender affirming care is it is not always, but it is frequently either medication or surgery. So things that
irreversible damage.
And the medication, it's not like you just get off of it and you're good, you're back to square one. No, the puberty blockers and as well as the cross-sex hormones, both of them can have irreversible lifelong effects when minors take them. And of course the surgeries, obviously I don't need to even go into how those can be life-changing and irreversible. So that would be the difference to what we're talking about when we talk about compassionate counseling for people people who have unwanted same-sex attraction, which we're talking about voluntary
Yeah,
talk
them
therapy.
willingly going and asking for that.
Yeah.
Now that's illegal for minors
Literally
in our state.
going to therapy, which is supposed to be the best thing in our culture. Like we live in like a therapeutic culture. That's a rant for another time. But anyway, there's such a big flipping difference between these things. And I hate when people
conflate them.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, what's really annoying is that counselors work for you. I mean, if you're going to get counseling, you're going to go to, if you're a Christian, you're going to go to a Christian counselor because you want to be counseled by someone who holds your values. And so this is really saying, oh, they don't actually work for you. No, Minnesota is actually setting the agenda here. So making it so that minors can only get people that are going to counsel them to mutilate their bodies. That's terrible. And it really is a money thing, unfortunately, because they make a lot of money off of this. But that's the whole background, guys. Don't want to get too stuck in the weeds. That's the background. That's what happened. What did Children's Minnesota do in light of this? Well, they decided to tweet out a nice little affirming tweet. Here we go. Let's read it. It says, "We are proud of Minnesota. At Governor Tim Walz signed 2 bills into law that will help protect, support, and care for LGBTQ plus youth. 2 of our #KidExperts were invited to witness the signing of the bills that will ban conversion therapy and make Minnesota a refuge state for transgender people."
No, thank you.
So really what they did is they tweeted that out. They said again that these bills are going to protect, support, and care for Minnesota's children. What a bunch of lies. What a bunch of lies. So the main thing that I find interesting about all this, you guys, is the fact that they're acting like this is so mainstream and this is so supportive. And look at us. We're such heroes in our state. Well, guess what happened, you guys? They tweeted this out, and about like 90% of the comments, the only comments I saw, and I was scrolling for a long time, were negative responses from concerned Minnesotans. There were so many comments. I'm just going to share a few of them that I think are really get the point home. So many comments that were similar, but really just everyone, all of these parents and other concerned citizens stepping up and saying that they're concerned. One person tweeted in response, "How much money will this generate for the hospital?" That's a great question. They're going to be making a lot of money off of this. That's definitely a driving incentive. Another user tweeted out, "This is so disheartening. You support children being mutilated or given medicines that will harm them forever without parental consent or notification? May God have mercy on our state. These children can't even go on a field trip without a parent's permission or ears pierced." And that right there really is something we talk about so much on the podcast is why is our state allowing children to undergo irreversible damage without parental notification or consent when they can't do simple things like get a tattoo, get their ears pierced? Like they can't do that. Why? Because kids are so young and they can't consent to things like that when they're young because they will alter their body. And how much more does chopping off healthy parts of their body alter their body than getting your ears pierced? Like at least your ears can get closed back up. You can't regain a healthy organ of your body that you've chopped off. You just can't. Another user tweeted out, "Protect trans kids from hospitals seeking to mutilate and sterilize them for a profit. Will be heartbreaking to see the victims once they are adults. Sue Children's Minnesota for the harm you caused them. No amount of money will fix what you have done." That is so true. We will not be able to go back in history and change this. We're fighting hard to stop it now. But unfortunately, they're going to look back. Our country, our world is going to look back in however many years. And they're going to say, wow, who really thought this up? Who thought that it was fine to mutilate children's bodies and thought that that would turn out okay? I mean, this is going to be a bloody stain upon our nation and our state. Final tweet I want to highlight. Someone tweeted, "Money over morals for this hospital, I guess." That's the facts right there. It really is. It seems like it really is about money. It seems like they don't care about morality. And so I think, let's see, is there anything else I want to highlight from this story? So one of the pediatricians who works, she is the director of the gender health program. That's what it's called, gender health program at Children's Minnesota. And these are some lines from a TED Talk that she gave in September of 2020. I just want to share so that you know what the director believes about transgenderism. We talked about this before on the podcast briefly, I think like multiple podcasts ago, maybe months ago. But I just want to highlight some of these things because the director, this is the person that will be overseeing all these things, counseling these children, thinks that children as young as 3 can know they are transgender. And she says, quote, "It shouldn't surprise you that some transgender kids are claiming their identities as young as 3 and 4 years old. They know the categories. They know how they should feel inside based on their anatomy. And they also know the way that they see themselves doesn't line up with other people's expectations. From as young as some kids can talk, they're explaining to their parents the truth about their identities." To which I say, if kids are coming and telling their parents, I think I'm a boy, when they're actually born, when they actually are a biological girl, that actually shows that's like a bad sign of the parenting they've received and the people that they're around. Because kids on their own aren't just like, oh, I'm a different gender. They don't think that unless they're indoctrinated to think that. That's not normal. And if that ever does happen, that's a sign of something being severely wrong.
Yeah. Like we've talked, I think, a little bit on the podcast, how kids who exhibit signs of gender dysphoria are more likely to be autistic. So maybe there's something going on, like some sort of disorder in which they're just not being very well socialized, in the sense of they're not relating to other boys or other girls. So they are feeling that discomfort because not because that they are fundamentally on some level a member of the opposite sex, but because of that other disorder that's keeping them from being at this time in their lives socially well adjusted. So like, can't we talk about that being the cause instead, and treating that, which is the root cause, I think, in a lot of cases, as opposed to the mutilation that we've talked about so many times.
So we're talking about holistic healthcare here. What Moses said is so, so important. Let's treat what's causing this. Let's not just treat all the symptoms. And so a lot of times, especially girls that are struggling with gender dysphoria, they don't actually think that they're a boy, and neither will transitioning actually help them in any way. They're usually struggling with other things like anorexia, body dysmorphia, things like that, which is very common for teenage girls. And so really doing something completely different and trying to help them isn't going to help them at all. And so I just want to highlight a few other things before we move on, because we are coming to the close of our podcast episode. Moses, if we have time, we can share that final story, or we can just jump right in to share what we're reading this week.
Let's skip that for today.
Okay.
We'll put that in the show notes. Something you guys can check out.
Sounds good. We will. So just the bottom line here is that this health program, quote unquote health program for children here in Minnesota, provides puberty blockers. It provides cross-sex hormones and menstrual suppression drugs to children. This is what they do, you guys. The director, she has received the Queer Spaces Collective inaugural Youth Champion Award for, quote, being a steadfast advocate for the health and well-being of LGBTQ plus youth and families, et cetera, which, again, we know all euphemisms. This does not help children. This is all about virtue signaling and, unfortunately, money. So let's keep an eye on what they are doing and continue to speak up about the truth about how God made our bodies and about what children deserve, because every child deserves to turn 18 without having a body that has been irreversibly damaged and mutilated. So, Moses, quickly, I'm going to ask you what you're reading. Are you reading anything new this week, or is it the same stuff as last week?
You know, actually, it pretty much is the same books as last week.
Cool. Same for me. So
okay, well, we'll keep you guys updated. I just finished a book, but I haven't picked up anything new yet. So we'll. I guess this segment will be more interesting next week.
That's good. So let's go ahead and go to my favorite section of the podcast that we just started, where we share a verse that we've been thinking about, a verse that will hopefully be encouraging to you amidst the darkness that does pervade our state. We know that if we're faithful, that's all really we can do. We can be faithful, and we can hope and trust and pray and wait. And so, Moses, go ahead and give us our closing exhortation.
So I'm going to read a couple verses from the end of John 6. And this is a time when Jesus has told his disciples some really, really, really difficult things for them to hear. Short version, you can't be saved by following Jewish law, and you have to be born again. And verse 60, when many of his disciples heard it, they said, "This is a hard saying. Who can listen to it?" But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, said to them, "Do you take offense at this? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But there are some of you who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the beginning those who those were who did not believe, and who it was who would betray him. And he said, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by the Father." And this, I want to really focus on these verses. After this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So Jesus said to the 12, "Do you want to go away as well?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." So there's this moment where Jesus asks the 12, if everyone else leaves, will you also leave? And Peter says, no, you have the words of eternal life. Now, of course, Peter is the one who denies Jesus 3 times, but who is even after that brought back into Christ's family, just as we are, even when we sin and sin and sin again and again. And just this, what Peter recognizes there is so true.
Mm-hmm.
However hard the things of Jesus says some hard things. That's hard to get out of. We can't avoid that. And yet, where else would we go? For Jesus is the one who has the words of eternal life, the things, the message that changes all our lives, the gospel, that we can be saved by trusting him, following him.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just, someone shared that verse with me when I was in an extremely dark place in my life, and it is probably, you shared kind of your favorite verse last week, and I think this would be one of my favorite verses in the Bible. Lord, to whom will we go? For you have the words of eternal life. Guys, thank you so much for watching or listening to the Family Beacon podcast this week. A little bit of a longer episode, but thank you for staying with us. Remember, as Grace said at the beginning, follow us on social media to get critical updates. And if you don't get our email updates, you're missing out. Go to mfc.org/subscribe. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.